and welcome to this special bonus episode of the Dark Material Podcast, where we'll be cutting through into a bunch of questions from you listeners, sometimes subtly,
and sometimes not so much. From questions to answers, join us in this Q&A journey into the dark. I'm Ian.
And I'm Amy, and this week we'll be answering some of your burning questions. I think you've set us up for a fall there, Ian, by saying that there will be both questions and answers. I'm not sure if we'll be able to answer some of these questions.
There'll be words. Depends on the
There'll be
definition of an answer, Amy.
Oh, well.
Deep. Yeah, it's been a while. It's actually been a long while.
It has been a long
since
while.
the last Q&A. Because we're lazy? No.
We're
Because we're busy.
just a bit disorganised.
And disorganised. So yeah, sorry about that. Some of these go back a long way.
Yeah.
But there is one element of, I would hope, justifiable excuse here, in that we're trying to keep a lot of these questions spoiler-free.
Yeah.
So some of them we haven't been able to get to because we just haven't got to that part in the book.
Yeah.
Again, because we're fucking slow.
Yeah. And it's always nicer to be able to answer it fully for everyone. So there's definitely a few questions where it's like, we've been hanging on to that one for a while.
Yep.
But yeah, if you're happy to wait for a while and you do have questions or comments, please do get in contact with us via the usual means, thedarkmaterialpodcast@gmail.com or any of our social media things.
At Dark Material Pod on Twitter.
And at the Dark Material Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are our things. I think possibly, even though we say it every episode, I never remember it.
No.
So,
we're now not reading the script.
Professional.
So we've gone off piste. I have no idea. At the Dark Pod? No. Wait.
Who are we? I don't know. But before we do all of that, as this is a bonus episode, we'd also just like to give a shout out to our amazing patrons. Thank you very much for your support. It really means a lot. And for enabling us to donate to one of our favourite charities, which 10% of our donations go to, which is the World Land Trust. And Ian, we found out an interesting fact this morning about the World Land Trust, well, tenuously.
Okay.
Very tenuously.
Not about that. Well, unless I'm thinking of the other fact. But yeah, if anyone like me is a beleaguered hay fever sufferer.
He's not just a hay fever sufferer, he is a beleaguered hay fever sufferer.
Oh, much beleaguered
for
and
sure.
embattled and besieged by the pollen. This year has been apparently super bad. And there's kind of interesting reason for that, well, I guess two things. In cities, people tend to plant male trees, basically so that you don't get fruit everywhere, messing up pavements, leaving rotting fruit and flies and wasps and whatever else. So in cities, you tend to get more male trees than female. Obviously, it's the males that produce all the pollen.
Yeah,
so
they just dump it out there.
Yeah, so cities are actually where you're more likely to get hay fever through overexposure, I guess, as a kid. And then your immune system goes, fuck all of this, forever. Mm-hmm. So anyway, hay fever has been particularly bad. It's bad in cities. And an extra reason that it's bad in cities is because cities tend to be warmer.
Yeah.
And I guess more humid, maybe less airflow and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which encourages trees to release more pollen. And in cities there tends to be more carbon dioxide. You know, you've got buildings bleeding carbon dioxide out from concrete and obviously cars and maybe people. Don't know how much that's true, but anyway, I'm going to say it's very true. So you've got these few things that make trees produce more pollen that seem to occur in cities. But where else does this happen, Amy? Where else is this trend of hotter, more carbon dioxide driving, changes in, let's say, a world-like area?
The world?
Yeah, that's right, climate change. Whee! Globally.
That is our worst link ever.
It's quite bad. But yeah, one factor to why hay fever or pollen counts may be getting higher over time is climate change. Because climate change makes everything better.
So if your hay fever's been bad, we just need to sort out climate change. That's the easy solution.
Yeah,
Don't
that's
just
the quickest.
pop a bit of cetirizine or whatever it's
Cetirizine.
called. Cetirizine.
Yeah.
Then, we just solve climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Easy peasy.
And move out of cities.
And move out of cities.
And get some more fruit trees involved.
Yeah. And if you're planting a male tree, always plant a female tree next to it because they absorb the pollen.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, that's my phone.
Cool.
That's just the World Land Trust texting me to say, what a great advert for our work.
Oh, yeah.
It's so relevant.
Should we do that segue? So, as Amy said, from all Patreon donations, we give 10% to the World Land Trust, which is a charity focused on tackling climate change, also preserving areas of biodiversity and important regions of the world like coastal rainforests and habitats for endangered species. So it is geared around general environmental conservation, but also with a mind to trying to abate and avoid climate change.
Yeah.
So, if you want to find out more about the World Land Trust, you can visit them at www.worldlandtrust.org, where they've got a bunch of information about the various campaigns and projects that are underway. You can buy an acre of land, you can invest in one of their key projects, such as the Borneo Orangutan Corridors, which is preserving parts of the forests of Kinbangdantang. Fuck.
You can do it. I believe in you.
It's never going to happen, Amy.
I believe in you.
Kinabatangang floodplain. Come on!
Yeah.
Don't know if it was right, but it sounded good.
Yeah, it does sound good.
Anyway, you can check them out at worldlandtrust.org, and they do some great work,
They do.
which our patrons are contributing to. So, as a huge thank you to our patrons, we'd like to extend a special thanks to
Lani Lim,
Annika Grabber,
Milen,
Girls Gone Canon,
JC,
Edie Cheng,
Lynn Yelsing,
Rachel Lade,
Ilzy,
Ross,
Mackenzie M,
Stephen Lynch,
Anais van Ertvelder,
James Ort,
Kathy H,
Catherine A,
Ellie.
and Nina.
Thanks so much to all of you for supporting us. It means the world to us. And for those of you who are at a Panzer Beyond level, there's a little drawing flying its way over to you right now that I'm working on, which is very exciting. So yeah, if you want to be part of this group, then you can find us at patreon.com/Dark Material Podcast. And also should say, for anyone who wants to do a one-off bit of support, we have actually recommended to a few people who've asked about that, just donate directly to the World Land Trust, and we'll sort of include that as part of our here is the impact that we're making sort of report. That's the best.
Oh Christ!
That's the best way that we're that's the best way that we're recommending that at the moment, because Patreon is obviously, they don't really do one-off support. But if that's something you're interested in, do let us know and we can arrange that with you. Maybe sort things out with you. That'd be great.
Yeah, and just to say what we actually do or have on Patreon, we have a range of tiers. So you could sign up as a Zruff or dust particle right the way through Galavespians, Panzerbion, Bene Ilim or angels, right through to being a demon of the podcast. And at each tier you get a sort of range of different benefits. And as Amy's already talked about, for Panzerbion, you will get a hand-drawn picture from Amy.
Of your demon, of your choice. Yes.
So anyway, yes, you can check us out at patreon.com/darkmaterialpodcast, and thank you so much to the list of our current patrons who've helped us on the journey so far.
Yes, thank you very much. So without further ado, let's go straight to a question from one of those very special people, Jane, who got in contact to actually give us some information that we totally struggled on, which was one of the Milton quotes recently mentioned something about bulls, and we were like, we don't know what bulls are. Obviously not the animal.
The northern accent is harming you there, Amy.
What?
Bull or bull?
Bull.
Or, as in baal or
Bull.
baal?
A bull.
Bull.
A bull.
It's just papal bulls. It's just papal bulls.
Well, how would you pronounce it?
Bulls.
That to me, like, that sounds like you're saying bulls.
Not bulls. Bulls.
Balls.
There you go.
No, bull.
The rest of this podcast will just be Amy saying bulls.
Bull.
Bull.
Bulls.
Bull. Excellent.
That's obviously you.
What is a papal bull, Amy?
So, Jane got in contact saying this is about something called papal bulls. Not papal balls. We're not talking about the Pope's balls. That's a different thing. Which are orders or edicts. So pretty important. So thank you very much, Jane, for letting us know about that, because we struggled. It was really interesting, actually, and I looked up, like, why are they called bulls?
Why are they?
Actually, interestingly, Ian, it comes from the Latin bulla, which does mean
Not
like
bulla.
around. Not bulla,
Yeah.
no. And it's used to describe bull in generally is used to describe any kind of physical token of authentication that would be attached to a formal document to verify that a certain person has signed it. So if you can imagine the classic seal of approval sort of wax stamp example, where you have a particular seal which would be used to imprint in wax, which you see in kind of historical, fictional things or whatever all the time, or in like official, formal, proper documents. It's like that, but the embossed thing that you use to make the print in the wax, that is the bull, which is just physically attached to the document with a piece of string or cord. So it's really cool. It's actually a little physical lead or other metals, sometimes gold thing that's attached to the document. And the papal ones have St. Peter on one side and St. Paul, and then the actual an illustration of the Pope who's approved it as well. They look really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the ones that were flying around in that little extract from Milton.
Very good. I like the Latin as well.
Yeah, obviously you always like
a
the
cheeky bit of
Latin.
Latin is great.
Yeah.
We also got an email from listener Ronit.
Hi, Ronit.
It's brilliant. So this was, certainly from my perspective, a fantastic email.
Yeah.
Because it goes into all of the determinism-y stuff that we've talked about before and catches a really interesting, like, not contradiction, but point of confusion, I guess, in
so
having
confusing.
multiple worlds,
Yeah.
then also having a prophesied person, because aren't there millions of them? And so I've kind of, apologies on it, I've broken this down into my pithy and probably incomplete version of your very eloquent and well thought through email. But, effectively, are there multiple Lyras?
These are the
So
questions.
these are the questions posed in the
Ronit's
email,
asking,
and then I've
yeah.
got, then Ronit's got their own thoughts, and I've got mine as well. So are there multiple Lyras, given the multiverse? If yes, can any of them actually fail in their task, in their prophecy? So when tempted, do they just say no? Or does the temptator never get there? If that's the case, isn't it all a bit pointless? Because you've got this big thing of, it's the prophecy person, but what if in some cases they can fail and then those worlds become these interlocking autonomous machines and blah, 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 blah? Or is it actually no, but therefore across all universes there is a preordained outcome? So every single Lyra is preordained to ultimately succeed, in which case, the whole determinism
Or to
thing,
fail.
blah, blah. Yes. No. As in, there are millions of Lyras, none of them will ever fail.
Well, if
'Cause
the
it's just-
if the prophecy is that she will succeed, but we only know that the
Yes.
prophecy is that
She will be tempted.
she will be
I
tempted.
suppose so. Yes. And maybe the choice is hers and free will and yada, yada, yada.
My mind's already bending.
Yeah, or sorry, the final bit of that is kind of, there may be millions of Lyras, but there is only one that's actually the prophesied one, and the
Yeah.
rest are, Lyrish. So yeah, I just kind of love this, and maybe there is some quality to Lyra-ness that links them all. So is there some facet of Lyra as this kind of prophesied child that is just true in all universes, like a kind of prophetic lodestone quality, if you like, that like quantum entanglement, all the
Yeah.
Lyras have this quality about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said before, alternatively, maybe there's only one Lyra to rule them all, and there may be billions of others, but only one particular universe's outcome actually matters in the sort of grand cosmic sense, which is kind of cool and interesting.
So there's infinite Lyras, but only one of them.
Yeah.
Brain melt.
Yes.
And I have to say, this is one of the emails that we've been sitting on for quite a while because we wanted to get a little bit further into the Amber Spyglass before discussing it. Because I think there's still things in this email that we probably can't talk about.
Oh,
But-
yeah, I should say, there are a few bits that I've deliberately not covered there, keeping it to Lyra, but
Yeah.
yes.
But thank you so much for this email because
Yeah, really interesting.
it was really cool. And I occasionally reread it and go, brain melt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or think about it in different parts that we've been reading. So one of the bits is where Will, for example, is, I think in this book and one of the recent chapters, has been thinking about, well, I wonder if, I think it's when he's trying to work out what to do and he's thinking about all the infinite possibilities and how if he doesn't take one option, then that route in his life is effectively extinguished. So he just has to kind of keep going on. And I do think about that in terms of him just thinking and thinking and thinking and creating multiple wills by the microsecond in terms of what they would do. I will say as well, with that Lyra-ness, there is an element to which with the prophecy, there are almost checkpoints or little quality gates that she has to pass to
Brilliant.
be
Yeah.
to be the Lyra that is the prophesied Lyra. So there will be Lyras in Otherworld, I think, who would then not be captured in the prophecy because if, for instance, she hadn't learned to read the alethiometer and then couldn't do certain things, then she wouldn't be the prophesied Lyra.
Yes.
There's certain things about how Seraphina Pekkala recognises her as the Lyra, which if other multiverse Lyras hadn't done, then she wouldn't be they wouldn't be prophecy Lyra.
Yeah.
So if we think about infinite Lyras, there's a proportion of those infinite Lyras that would be prophecy Lyras.
Yeah.
And there's a proportion of them that wouldn't be.
Yeah, or take it to an extreme, and there's only one that actually passes every single one of the infinite filters that might knock her off course
Yeah.
at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, isn't it?
It's very cool. I like the idea of one Lyra to rule them all, though.
Yeah.
And that is definitely the Lyra that we're hearing about and
Yeah.
being written about.
Yep.
Great question. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
yes.
That's lots to chew over there.
Yeah, thanks, Ronit.
So we also got another great question from Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe. And this was actually off the back of us struggling with time and space at the beginning of this book. And actually, we were having a discussion on Twitter with Lo about this. Hi, Lo. That is great, actually.
Is this now the thing that we do?
I guess it is, yeah. And basically, we were talking to Lo about it, and they were suggesting how the physical differences and the space could work between Lyra's world and Will's world, and how Will can travel at different... Basically, how Mrs. Coulter gets to the cave is very confusing. But anyway, and Joe was kind of seeing all that happen, and those discussions going on, and thought, lots of thoughts, and so put it all down in an email. And again, a very, very good email, which we're just going to go through blow by blow, because there's a lot of quite good points in there. So Joe starts out with what we definitely know, which is the idea that there is a thinner space between worlds where the Aurora is, and that before Lord Asriel blowing everything up, you always had to go via Cittàgazze, so that the world of Cittàgazze therefore must have what Joe calls a unique spatial existence in being able to basically be this gateway to lots of different worlds, rather than you being able to go straight between worlds. But then the Lord Asriel's anomaly and blowing everything up kind of changes that, which is very interesting.
Yeah, so I guess the point there is that Cittàgazze, you could move, let's say, from Svalbard in Lyra's world into Cittàgazze, and then step immediately out of Cittàgazze into Mumbai in Will's world, because Cittàgazze has a weird, spatial element in how it connects other worlds.
Yes, because Charles Latram, for instance, can presumably... Well, we know from Svalbard in the Aurora, you can see Cittàgazze itself, but then also Charles Latram / Lord Boreal can go from Cittàgazze into Oxford, also in Lyra's world, and into Oxford in Will's world.
Despite being able to see
Cittàgazze from Svalbard.
Gotcha.
So there's a weird bending of space there in Cittàgazze itself, which is really cool. But then after Lord Asriel blows everything up, there does seem to be a more close relationship between Cittàgazze and Will's Oxford, because there's a whole thing about the heist where they're cutting through in the subtle knife, and it's all very close together. So then after everything's blown up, then taking what we know about that and Cittàgazze in particular, Joe suggests that maybe Lyra's world has been kind of concertinaed a little bit, because it seems like people like Mrs. Coulter can cut out huge distances by going through Cittàgazze, and that maybe the fact that the anomaly or Lord Asriel blowing stuff up from Lyra's world has affected the spatial relationship of Lyra's world to other worlds, whereas Cittàgazze and Will's Oxford match perfectly. Lyra's world seems to be the ones that is a bit messed up, or maybe other worlds are a bit messed up in relation to Cittàgazze, and it's just Cittàgazze and Will's Oxford that are very close together. So it's all super confusing, and I think Joe gets to the point towards the end of his email where he has confused himself into many knots, as he puts it. But yeah, there's one final little idea that he came up with. I say little idea, it's quite a big idea, which is if Asriel's world, so the one where he's building his fortress and stuff, possibly was forced into existence at the point at which he blew up the worlds, and therefore disrupted everything spatially, as some possible theory about why the space of everything is changed when he blows things up, which I really like as an idea, because we don't really know much about Asriel's world, but it does more or less seem to be
barren and devoid and stuff as well.
And also time seems to work differently there, which is super interesting. So if he's messed up the space-time continuum in some way, I'm using that phrase without really knowing what it means, but just bandying that around, that's really cool. So my goodness, there's lots to go on there, Joe, but really like your stepping through of those thoughts, and I think there's quite a lot to think about. There's also a little spoilery thing which we'll come back to way later. At the end of the email.
That's the last point we can't really cover now. No, we can't.
No, we can't. But it does. But the last point, not without spoiling anything, is basically that there are some worlds where they seem to have an even completely different relationship in terms of space to other worlds.
Yeah.
So it's complicated.
I do think with all of this, though,
yeah,
and this goes back to the first point as well, and our general machinations about, oh, is Lyra the only one? What about the millions of other Lyras? Blah, blah, blah. I do kind of think, unlike writers maybe like Tolkien, where internal world consistency language use, how the etymology of X relates to Y, the chronology of this person being the grandfather of this person who's then the uncle of that person and blah, is all supposed to be very accurate and super on point, and I think there are very few inconsistencies. I do think Pullman is just a bit like, I don't know, just fucking...
weird physics stuff.
I don't think it's an expert.
I don't think
I think
so.
it's a mistake, and like, the fact that you can see Chittagazzi from Svalbard, and yet it's supposed to correlate to other worlds. I think in Pullman's mind, I think, all the worlds basically are variations on planet Earth with the same distances between them. You cut through from A to B, from world A to B, and you are in the same sort of coordinates on the surface of the Earth. Yeah. And all the differences to do with the biology and is there a river there or not, you know, is it a rainforest or is it a savanna or blah, 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 is because of all the quirks of how bits of geology have changed and whether meteorites have hit and how evolution has taken place and blah, 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 blah. I think, this is just my own reading, I don't think Pullman's gone as deep as, maybe space-time acts differently between different worlds.
I sort of agree, yeah.
I think the idea is supposed to be that there is geographical continuousness, continuity, that's right, between all the worlds, and these anomalies are just like Pullman kind of fucking up.
Yeah, I sort of agree, but I also maybe I wouldn't go as far as say it's fucking up, because I just think that he leaves it intentionally vague because he either doesn't think that it's an important part of the story, so doesn't want to focus on it too much, or because he wants to leave it vague to allow people to speculate.
Sure, yeah. It's fucking up in the sense of if you were trying to do a Tolkien and create perfect consistency, then this clearly isn't it. But I don't think that's actually what he was ever trying to do. It's certainly not his core interest.
No.
So, yes. I love the speculation, though.
Yeah,
and I do really like the idea that there might be different versions of space-time.
Oh, yeah.
In different worlds.
Yeah.
Because that just makes this all super interesting.
Yeah. So
and
thank
also
you.
There's no reason it would be consistent, because the whole point is, if you've got little quantum changes going on, then maybe something in the laws of physics could be different between worlds.
I don't know enough to agree or disagree with that. But thank you very much, Joe, for the question.
Yes.
/comment / general mind-melting thoughts.
So we got another email from listener Patricia.
Hi, Patricia.
That's good. Go again.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Hi, Patricia. Oh, hi. Getting more and more creepy. Again, more ponderings, I would say, than just direct question, which we like more.
Oh, yeah.
I really like this because it kind of cuts through the various machinations and complexities we've just been going through for the past couple of questions.
Yeah.
Which is basically, could it just simply be that Coulter's speed getting to the Himalayas is almost a function of the timeline? So is it perhaps that the book is actually bouncing between kind of future and present? So Patricia says here that she often has the impression that Mrs. Coulter has been in the cave for a while, a couple of weeks maybe, and the first chapter would have been happening while Will is already in Lyra's world.
Yeah.
So, I guess Will is slightly further... Ahead, yeah.
Yeah.
And that when we're with Lyra and Coulter in the cave and some of the back and forth with Roger discussions in Lyra's dreams, this isn't necessarily all chronologically linear with Will.
I think that's right. There is something actually, because just before we started recording this episode, I was doing a bit of reading for a couple of chapters' time, and there's something in that which I think proves that. But I have a lead on a timeline.
Interesting.
For the Amber Spyglass, so I'm going to double check that. But I think Patricia might be right. I think the bits that we've been seeing of Mrs. Coulter and Amma are effectively in the future and happening over a compressed amount of time, but have been foreshadowed, not really foreshadowed, but explained before they are actually happening in comparison to the rest of the characters' storylines, so that there's more drama basically when everything kind of reconnects and all the timelines coalesce.
Yeah, interesting. Does that mean though that there's some bit of
coalesce, not coalesce?
Yeah, maybe. Does that mean there's some bit of Mrs. Coulter's timeline that is just missing in the book? So we have a gap between her taking Lyra.
But that would be her travelling for ages.
And then it's just a couple of weeks.
It'll be just her travelling for ages.
And then we get the cave.
Yeah. So understandable that they cut that out.
So that feels kind of, fairly clear cut.
Yeah.
I quite like it.
Yeah.
The other point that Patricia makes then, which moves on from how these worlds and timelines do or do not work together, which is a comment about the sort of dream sequences or the strange conversations between Lyra and Roger. And this actually goes back to a point that I think your parents made, maybe your dad, about the effect that being in a long-term coma can have on people, engendering kind of hallucinations and effectively forms of brain damage over time.
Yeah.
And yeah, Patricia's point here is that maybe those snippets of conversation are as short as they are or as kind of intermittent as they are, because Lyra only gets into that stage when she's at the deepest point of her coma. So maybe having just been drugged plus, I don't know, a few hours gets her into the sort of deepest part of her sleep where maybe her brain starts connecting like this or enters that mode of thought or that mental state, which I think is very interesting.
That's
and cool.
really interesting. I quite like that idea. So basically, she's having that conversation with Roger over several days, basically.
Yes, because...
But she's only coming into that. Well, why isn't Roger like, where were you?
Where have you been? Yeah, well, we don't really know what the conversation is yet at this stage and all that stuff.
Is it all in her head?
Yeah, exactly.
She might be, creating that illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. But, either that or that's also another part of the story which is spread out when actually it's all only happening over 5 minutes.
Yes, yeah.
Also, but it's actually been spread out in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But I really like this idea.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Patricia. Lots of interesting stuff, and I like the simplicity of the first point. Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. So we also have now a voice message from a different Patricia. Hi, Patricia. So I'm just going to play this now.
Hello. So this is a very long, a very strange tangent to have taken, but was listening to your last episode on chapter 2 of Am Spyglass, and Ian said something about flying dog angels, and it immediately took me to the Pixar film Coco, where Miguel and his dog go into the underworld, the land of the dead, Dia de los Muertos, etc., etc. And at the end of the film, the dog becomes this spirit thing, kind of like a demon in the underworld, and he like grows wings and stuff and starts flying around, and he's this essentially a demon to the dead people in that film, all of Miguel's ancestors and whoever else is there, all the dead people in like Mexico, essentially, who are Christian and pray to the deities or whatever. And it made me think about if demons go, because demons like die when the human dies as well in his Dark Materials world. So Roger's demon would have died when he went to the underworld, but then it just made me think, what happens to animals when they die? And do they go to the underworld too? Like actual animals in like Lyra's world? And do they go to the land of the dead as well? It's a very, very strange tangent, but I thought it was so cool that there were so many parallels between his Dark Materials and the animated film Coco, because that's all actually, I think, based on real beliefs of those families in Latin America who believe in like the Day of the Dead spirits coming back on the Day of the Dead and having the whole festival and stuff. So I just thought it was really interesting. And I know if you wanted to discuss this on the podcast, you wouldn't be able to do it for a while, and you don't want to be too spoilery and stuff. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting to draw that parallel, and I hope you find it interesting too. Maybe you can look into it some more, because it's been a while since I've watched that film. But if you haven't watched it, I would definitely recommend it. It's brilliant.
What a question. I mean, we have actually seen the film Coco. It was quite a while ago actually that we saw it.
Yeah,
so I did have to revise. I did a bit of Pixar revision.
I was just wondering if that was why you recommended watching it.
No. I think we watched it ages and ages ago. But for anyone who hasn't seen the film, it's basically exactly as Patricia describes. They go into a world of the dead, which looks really cool, by the way. Yeah. And there are these spirit animals, these fabulous creations. I think it's really interesting, these questions as well, and these parallels that are being drawn. But first of all, I did do a bit of research into Coco. Thank you, Patricia, for giving me a reason to do more learning about more things. And the creatures in that specifically, so these flying, very colourful, very beautiful looking spirit animals, things, I guess. Yes, yeah. They're these sort of, if you've not seen the film, they're sort of a chimera animal or hybrid animals that fly around the world of the Dead or the spirit world in the film, acting as a guide to the characters. But I found out, disappointingly, this is not actually really part of the Day of the Dead traditions in Mexico, which is really disappointing.
So just Pixar going, we want colourful animals.
Well,
Throw bar it in.
Well, yeah, but then I couldn't find many ideas about what the spirit world looked like in general. So I do think that Pixar had to create a lot.
Yeah, fair.
The animals are based on something called, that does exist though, called alebrijes, which are art objects or these beautiful creations by Mexican folk artists, which are really popular, and they're often made out of particular kind of soft wood or from paper. And they were initially created by a guy called Pedro Linares, who had a background in his family as a piñata maker, hence the kind of use of some of the same materials.
And yes,
Yeah. But he fell quite ill when he was young and spent a long time in a fever dream, more parallels to his Dark Materials, in which he imagined this vivid and strange world where loads of mismatched, mushed up creatures, you know, for example, part jaguar, part owl, or part snake or whatever. And he named them after the noise that they made in his dream and set about trying to recreate them physically when he got better. And initially they were quite horrifying and scary because that was the vibe of this horrible dream that he'd been having, or set of dreams that he'd been having. But then when he saw that the more colourful and appealing he made them, the more intriguing people found them, a whole new art form was born. And you can see amazing versions of this, or people who have great collections, and that's what the spirit animals in Coco were based on,
right.
Because of some of the animators or designers were obsessed with these things before they started working on the film. So I quite like how it sounds like a complete opposite of Lyra's fever dream, which is just grey. And also the alebrije are seen to represent air. So I quite like the possible link to demons there, in this idea that the demons seem to dissipate, often being described as drifting into the air or the wind or the breeze.
When the human dies.
When their human dies, as for animals, it's a really good question about what happens to them after they die. I guess we know that there are not just humanoid conscious beings for a start. So we know that the Malefa that we've met so far are conscious.
And Galavespians.
They're
humanoid, I suppose.
Pansabion.
Yeah.
So you would expect...
scrumping, cider-making kangaroos in Australia.
Stop mentioning the kangaroos, Ian.
Yeah.
So Lyra just seeing forms of people around seems quite odd, to be honest, if this is really the world of the dead that she's envisioning. But maybe it's not. Maybe she is just imagining at this point, and therefore she's only imagining what she knows or what would be familiar to her.
I think I would guess that animals go nowhere because of the kind of hints that we got from Pullman about a qualitative difference from humans to everything else, or conscious beings like humans to everything else. So with Mulefa, they're described as being very different to the grazing animals. You know, they almost couldn't be more different. You know, they clearly have this intelligence or this awareness that humans do that, I don't know, other animals don't.
Yeah.
But that does feel a bit harsh. And also in the
does...
like spectrum of intelligence, I don't think there is some cliff edge where humans are suddenly, oh look, conscious.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought about as well when I started pondering this, because I was like, well, it does seem like that classic thing of we humans are different to other animals and therefore we're exceptional, which is a little bit complicated because chimpanzees are really intelligent, but bonobos have amazing emotional intelligence. For example, dolphins have different dialects that they speak in. Like, where do you draw the line, basically? I find that very interesting. And even if it's about self-consciousness, there's various, I can't remember what it's called, when human babies develop the ability to recognize themselves. I don't remember what the exact test is called, but animals do pass that test.
Yes.
And if it's about being conscious of yourself as an entity, then lots of animals will pass that test. And they should be in the world of the dead. I'm going to say that they would be in the world of the dead. Anyone who could recognize themselves in a mirror and not, like, try and fight it.
That's the line, is it?
That's the line.
Okay.
I'm saying arbitrarily. That's my headcanon. If you could put a mirror in front of a being and them not be like, hey, you talking to me? Then they make it into the world of the dead.
Nice.
So there's my answer, Patricia. Don't know if it's what you're looking for. But thank you for the great question and for the voice note. We do
thanks a lot.
Voice note.
Yeah, voice notes are great.
Voice notes are
Hat
good.
tip to anyone out there.
Yeah.
Occasional voice note.
Yeah, send us
Pretty
those. It's all good. So we also had a comment from Maddie.
Hi,
Maddie.
Hi.
On Instagram as well, who mentioned recently when she was catching up on episodes that she imagines the seed pods as like a red blood cell in shape.
Oh,
Which
right,
is a
yeah,
way
yeah.
better description than a coconut donut peach.
Yes.
So, well done there, Maddie. And also, just a shout out there, congratulations, Maddie, on your new little son, Peter. And congratulations, Patricia, on becoming an auntie, because
Patricia.
it's the best.
Yeah, congrats.
Being an auntie is the best. I mean, congratulations, Maddie, as well, but I prefer the role of auntie.
Hashtag no responsibility. Yep, congratulations. Okay, we'll continue the theme of slightly short and sharp.
Yeah.
So we got another recommendation, I guess.
Yeah, recommendation.
Or another point of comparison from listener Kathy. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Kathy. Sorry, I wasn't ready.
It's fine. We're going to leave it. We're leaving it. Imperfection is perfection. Yeah, and the comparison was basically to something that I've never seen before
You've
or
never
read.
seen?
No. Is it a film?
Yeah.
Yes. Adaptation of a book called A Never-Ending Story by Michael Onde.
Ender? I don't know
Ender?
how you pronounce that name.
But yeah, so no, I haven't seen it, and fucking hell, it's weird. When I looked up the YouTube video, so it's what, a 70s or an 80s?
It's an 80s film, I think. Or it might be early 90s. I definitely watched it as a kid.
It's pre-CGI, or certainly pre-good CGI.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Dodgy animatronics.
The
and,
flying dog dragon is
yes,
the best, Ian.
And like weird costume monster design things. Very, very strange.
I'm sure you will have seen it. It was a really popular film when we were kids.
Slightly...
Maybe it's slightly too
awkward
old.
about your age, but slightly
much
before
older
my
than you.
time, maybe.
Maybe I only watched it because my brother watched it.
Yeah. My sister,
One of them.
The name rings a bell, but anyway, it's about a kid's... is it like an imaginary world? It's this little boy who's exploring this, never-ending story of a sort of fantastical realm that he's moving through, and the film kind of, captures his journey through this never-ending story. And I like the comparison to a multi-world kind of universe where once this child enters the other world, he comes across all these fantastical beings and, I don't know, sort of strangeness, but links to kind of the real world and how our universe exists. But I don't know if it's like his Dark Materials. At least that film. Very, very weird. Very trippy.
Yeah. We're going to have to watch it, Ian.
Yes, well, maybe.
It is a classic.
Is it a classic?
It's a classic, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, thanks for the recommendation. I enter this one with a little bit more trepidation than the others because it just looked batshit crazy. But yeah, I will check out Neverending Story.
Yeah.
At least the book, if not the film. Don't know how hard I can lean into that film.
Well, I feel like the film would be
Struck
easier
me
to
as
do
bizarre.
than watching... No, watching the film would be easier than reading the book, surely.
Maybe. Depends how bad the film is.
Oh, it could be fun bad, you know?
But yeah, thanks, Kathy.
Thank you. So we also got an email from Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi,
Steve
Suzanne.
Gave me shit for that earlier. Who got in touch with like loads of really interesting stories, so we loved it. So it started off with a comment about the idea of photographing the dead, which we mentioned based on a quote from Emily Dickinson, I think. It was an intro to one of the chapters.
Yes,
And there was this
the
tradition of
sleeping
photographing
child. Yeah.
dead children. And Suzanne got in contact saying it was really popular in the late 1800s, especially in the United States, as a way that family could capture one last moment with a loved one, which I think is very interesting. And maybe it's like more weird that we have a weird relationship to death these days than looking back on this and saying, well, that's weird. But anyway. And Suzanne mentioned there's a BBC show based on this whole strange fad called Dead Still, which I really want to watch. It's got some really good actors in, actually.
All right.
I did have a look at a trailer, but I can't find where to watch it, because weirdly, it seems to be only available on BBC America, not on BBC. So...
And
odd.
it's about these photographs.
Yeah, it's sort of a fictional story about people who photograph dead people.
Okay, all right.
As part of that craze. And Suzanne, who is a paediatrician, also shared some stories about, inspired by the part where the monkey is pulling apart the bat in the cave,
Oh, yeah, that
which is
chestnut.
really horrible. I think we talked a bit in that episode about this link that you hear about a lot in terms of people, especially serial killers or people who go on to do something very violent or dangerous, having a tendency to start out on animals before they start hurting people or humans. And Suzanne did share some stories, some pretty horrible stories about her experience with that. And
Not her
sort
direct
of
experience.
Well-
as a nose in
Oh,
her.
right, no,
she's
with
not been
her
animal
patients.
harming.
Which was very interesting. And also for people who've seen the TV series, there is if you don't want spoilers, skip ahead 2 minutes now. But there is a scene between Mrs. Coulter and Lee Scoresby where Mrs. Coulter discusses or refers to potentially being abused as a child. And Suzanne did say that was something that she saw quite commonly as a link. So I thought, that was really interesting. And again, we have to think about Golden Monkey and Mrs. Coulter as the same person. And think about that in all of this complicated stuff. Also in her work, Suzanne travelled to Africa, where she visited tribes as the first white person that they'd ever seen, to much amazement from their side, where she was there to vaccinate against polio and measles, as well as give some basic medical training to make sure children there were safe from fires and stuff. And similar to Mary, she found that there's definitely an easy way or a common language that can be found, or a way to communicate in humour. So I think when she was going through that chapter with us where Mary's trying to communicate with them, we left her and we just end up just laughing at each other. That really rung true as something that she'd had as an experience herself in trying to communicate with people when she didn't speak any of their language and they didn't speak any of hers. So I really like that as a commonality. So thank you very much, Suzanne, for sharing your wonderful experiences with us. It was great to hear them.
Okay,